The sound of tires grinding against the wet pavement echoed like a warning. A black SUV stopped in front of the towering glass gates of the Cascade Grand Hotel, where the Seattle sunset poured down like molten amber, washing the building in a cold, golden glow. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, slender, composed, yet carrying an aura that made the air itself seem to hesitate. Dana Whitfield, 42 years old, CEO of this luxury hotel chain, a name that commanded respect across the West Coast financial world. But tonight no one recognized her. No bodyguards, no assistants, no welcoming banners. Just a woman in a grey blazer, carrying an old canvas tote, walking into her own empire like an anonymous guest. Dana wasn't here to be celebrated. She was here to observe, to quietly test the rumors that the Seattle branch was losing the very spirit she had built, one that valued humanity over profit. She wanted to be treated like an ordinary guest, to hear the greetings, see the eyes, and feel the truth for herself. The automatic doors slid open, the air conditioning brushed against her face, with the faint scent of white orchids and new leather. The lobby air was both elegant and cold, the kind of luxury that made people afraid to breathe too deeply. The marble floor reflected high heels, rolling suitcases, and practiced smiles. Dana walked slowly, taking in every detail. Her gaze settled on the front desk, where a young blonde woman typed lazily, her fingers tapping against the keyboard. "Good evening," Dana said softly, her voice low and warm. "I have a reservation under the name Whitfield." The woman looked up. Erin Wallace, 25, a receptionist, barely 3 months into the job. Her eyes swept over Dana, the way one scans a forgettable face. No smile, no greeting, just a flat, tired question. "Name again." "Whitfield." "Dana Whitfield." Erin typed, frowned, and said, "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked tonight. We're only accepting confirmed reservations through the system." Dana tilted her head slightly, her calm smile unchanged. "Are you sure there's always a suite held for me?" Erin folded her arms and exhaled through her nose. "No record of that." "Maybe you're at the wrong hotel," she said, glancing mockingly toward the gold logo behind her. "This is the Cascade Grand, a 5-star property, not some budget place near the bus station." From the bar, a couple turned to look, laughing quietly. A man sipping whiskey raised an eyebrow. The air in the lobby shifted colder, heavier. Dana straightened one hand, resting lightly on her bag strap. In her brown eyes there was no anger, only an unnerving calm. "Interesting," she said slowly, "because I'm exactly where I should be. And I believe my name is right there on the building." Erin gave a short, dry laugh. "You're saying you own this place?" Her tone carried playful contempt, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dana's reply was simple. "Call your manager." Erin turned away, tapping her phone with irritation. "He'll be right out, but honestly, you should." The office door opened and a middle-aged man walked out with a clipboard in hand. Calvin Brooks, 40, the night manager, with the look of someone more afraid of problems than of mistakes. He gave Dana a brief glance, then turned to Erin. "What's going on here?" "She says she owns the hotel," Erin said, smirking. Calvin chuckled politely, his hoarse voice forced. "Must be some misunderstanding, ma'am." "What's your name?" "Dana Whitfield." The air froze. Calvin blinked, then let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, what a coincidence." "That's the same name as me," Dana interrupted. "And I think you should call security. It seems your system has a serious issue." Calvin's voice wavered. "Erin, call security." "Just to be safe." 2 guards appeared, tall and broad-shouldered, blocking the lobby doors. The space fell silent. Some guests pulled out their phones to record, but Dana didn't flinch. She simply took out her phone and dialed. "This is Whitfield," she said calmly. "Seattle branch. I'm being denied entry to my own property. Fix it." She hung up, slid the phone into her pocket, and looked at Calvin. "Now let's see who's right." Calvin's throat tightened. Sweat formed on his forehead as he scanned the lobby, trying to look in control. Erin stood frozen behind the desk, biting her lip. Guests began whispering. A middle-aged woman raised her phone to record. No one knew what was happening, but everyone sensed they were witnessing something big. Dana stood there silent, motionless, yet somehow commanding the entire room. 1 minute passed, then 2. The elevator chimed. Its doors slid open, and 2 men stepped out, their faces. Tense Patrick Evans, Regional Vice President, and Miguel Torres, Branch Director. They stopped dead at the sight of Dana. Color drained from their faces. "Ms. Whitfield?" Patrick blurted his voice, trembling. "I am so sorry. We had no idea you were coming to Seattle today." The entire lobby fell silent. Erin took a step back, pale as paper. Calvin's clipboard slipped from his hands, clattering to the marble floor. Dana tilted her head slightly, her tone quiet, but cutting through the air like a blade. "One phone call. That's all it takes to change how people behave." Patrick bowed slightly. "The penthouse suite 1601 is ready. Please accept our apologies, Miss Whitfield." Dana said nothing. She simply scanned the faces around her bowed heads, trembling hands, shame creeping through the marble stillness. In that moment, power needed no title. Erin inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself, but shame flickered in her eyes. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but no sound came out. The elevator opened again. Dana stepped inside, turning once to face the lobby. Light glimmered across her face. Half shadow, half flame, the face of a woman who had learned to master every wound life had dealt her. "We'll talk in the morning," she said evenly as the door slid shut. The elevator closed, leaving silence in its wake. Erin clenched her fists, hearing her own heartbeat, pounding in her chest. Calvin stood frozen, breathing hard, realizing the truth that this night no one in the Cascade Grand would sleep. And on the top floor, Dana stood before the panoramic glass window, watching the last trace of sunset fade over Seattle's skyline. A faint smile crossed her lips, not of victory, but of revelation. The truth was simple. There were still those who hadn't learned to see a person before seeing their skin or their clothes. Tomorrow she would make sure they learned. The atmosphere inside the Cascade Grand Hotel lobby felt frozen after the silent storm that had just passed. When the elevator doors closed behind Dana Whitfield, taking her shadow with them, murmurs began to ripple through the air, half curiosity, half shame. But this story didn't end with the moment of realization. It began with the very glances and judgments that had quietly slipped into words people thought were harmless. Erin Wallace, the young receptionist, sank into her chair, her hands trembling slightly. On the computer screen, the name Whitfield was clearly displayed. She had simply never noticed. She didn't yet grasp who she had insulted, but deep down she knew this was not just any guest. Fear rose in her like a tide, mixing with the bitterness of shame caught in her throat. Calvin Brooks, the manager, still stood in the middle of the lobby, his face rigid. He said nothing, staring into space, his mind echoing with Patrick Evans' voice. "Ms. Whitfield." Each syllable struck like a hammer. He understood tonight his career might have just ended. Behind the counter, Erin bit her lip, haunted by a single question. Why did I say that? Why did I assume she didn't belong here? She remembered the calm, commanding eyes of that woman, how she never raised her voice, never lost her composure, only stood there, as if her silence alone could make the world bow. Inside the elevator, Dana leaned her head gently against the cool, mirrored wall. Reflected before her was a woman who had learned to conceal emotion after decades of navigating a ruthless business world. Yet in the corner of her eye, there was still a flicker of pain, not from being insulted, but from having to prove her worth inside the very empire she had built. The door to the penthouse suite 1601 opened. The room was silent, flawless in its luxury-scented candles, towels folded into swans, a bottle of wine waiting by the window. Everything was perfect, but Dana felt nothing but emptiness. She slipped off her shoes and walked barefoot across the carpet, her eyes drifting to the wide glass window overlooking the city of Seattle. Car lights painted soft glows across her face, half shadow, half light. A voice from the past echoed in her mind. 18 years ago in Chicago, she had been in Erin's place. The same front desk, the same computer, the same kind of guest she once misjudged. But unlike Erin, Dana hadn't looked down on anyone she simply hadn't been seen. She had been the black girl on the night shift, even though her heart already dreamed of hotels that would one day bear her name. She sat on the leather chair and took a deep breath. The faint scent of cedarwood lingered, but it couldn't drown the sting in her throat. Still the same, she whispered. 20 years, and still the same. Downstairs, Erin was being swept into the whirlwind of consequences. Patrick and Miguel returned to the management office, issuing urgent orders to HR send a full incident report to headquarters tonight. Include the names Calvin Brooks and Erin Wallace. Both men knew Dana wouldn't let this pass as a small mistake, but they also knew she wasn't driven by vengeance. She would teach a lesson. In the staff lounge, Calvin called his wife, his voice shaking. "I think I just lost my job," he said. On the other end, his wife's voice faltered, but Calvin continued. "Not because she's angry, but because I forgot why I do this to serve people, not to classify them." Erin walked in, eyes red. "I am sorry, Mr. Brooks." He didn't look at her, only said quietly, "Who are you apologizing to?" Erin lowered her head. "To her. But I can't face her." Calvin sighed. "You will. You don't apologize to save your job. You do it to save yourself." Up on the top floor, Dana opened her laptop and reviewed the revenue reports. Every figure was perfect, yet something felt wrong. Profits may rise, but hearts are cracking, she thought. Numbers couldn't show the forced smiles at the front desk or the judgmental glances in the lobby. And she knew that without changing, the culture within the Cascade Grand would become just another cold, soulless hotel, the kind she once vowed never to build. She typed a short message to Patrick, meeting with all management tomorrow morning. "I want each of them to recount what happened tonight in their own words." Then she closed her laptop and stood. Outside, the Seattle rain began to fall, long, heavy drops washing away the contradictions of the day. She thought of Erin, that young, inexperienced receptionist. In Erin's eyes, Dana had seen a reflection of her younger self, but distorted by environment, by fear, by ignorance. Maybe she isn't bad, Dana told herself. She just hasn't been taught how to see. Downstairs, Erin packed her things to leave. As she passed through the lobby, her eyes caught the golden plaque that read, "Cascade Grand a Whitfield Property." The reflection of that name froze her in place. Whitfield. The word echoed in her head like a tolling bell. She remembered every word she'd said, every look she'd given, and a hot flush of shame rose to her cheeks. "What have I done?" she whispered. Erin stepped toward the exit, her hand trembling. She turned back toward the front desk, the place where she had told the owner herself, "This is a 5-star hotel, not a budget stop." That line now rang in her head, like a blade. Outside, the wind whipped through the damp air from Elliott Bay. The Seattle night was shrouded in mist, but inside Erin's heart, everything was painfully clear. At the same time, on the 16th floor, Dana stood silently by the window. The city glittered below, towers glowing like beacons of pride, piercing the dark. She thought of everyone like Erin, people blinded by the very system she had built. And she knew this wasn't the first time, but it could be the last. She touched her phone, opened a new note, and wrote the first line for tomorrow's meeting. Not everyone needs to be punished. Some just need to be seen. Outside, the rain drummed gently on the glass, a familiar rhythm. Dana closed her eyes, letting the mist-lit glow soften her thoughts. She knew this battle wasn't about firings, but about changing how people see one another. That night, Seattle slept under the rain, while in a room high above, a woman was planning a reform, not through power, but through empathy and wisdom. And when the clock struck midnight, a flash of lightning lit up the window, illuminating Dana Whitfield's face. That light reflected the unwavering eyes of a woman who understood one simple truth. Dignity is not something given. It is something that must be kept even when the world forgets it. The next morning, Seattle seemed cleansed by the night's rain. The early sunlight filtered through thin clouds, casting a pale reflection on the glass walls of the Cascade Grand Hotel. Inside, the air remained heavy. A strange, uneasy silence blanketed the lobby, as if even the walls and chandeliers were aware that something terrible had happened. At 7 o'clock, Dana Whitfield appeared. Her charcoal suit fit perfectly, and each step of her heels on the marble floor echoed like the ticking of a clock counting down. She was no longer there as a guest. She came as the woman who held the fate of this entire building in her hands. And everyone who had disrespected her the night before would now have to sit before her and recount what had happened this time under the light of truth. Inside the glass-walled conference room near the lobby, the atmosphere was thick like a storm trapped within 4 walls. 4 people sat at the table. Patrick Evans, the regional vice president, his expression grim. Miguel Torres, the branch director, holding a trembling file. Calvin Brooks, the NITA manager, trying to sit upright, though his eyes stayed down. And Erin Wallace, the receptionist, pale-faced, her hands clasped tightly together. Dana entered quietly, but with undeniable gravity. The door closed behind her, and every sound in the room vanished. She placed her briefcase on the table, removed her glasses, and looked at each person in turn. No greeting, no smile. Just one clear, firm sentence. "Begin. Tell me what happened last night." Calvin swallowed hard. He glanced at Patrick, searching for rescue, but Patrick only gave a small nod. "Tell the truth." "Ms. Whitfield," he began hoarsely, "I received a call from the front desk about a guest complaining there was no available room. When I came out to check, I saw what Dana interrupted." "Saw you standing at the counter," Calvin said, his voice lowering. "Erin said your name wasn't in the system. I thought it was a technical error. But when you said you were the owner, you didn't believe me," Dana said evenly, finishing his sentence. "And you called security?" Calvin nodded, unable to meet her eyes. Dana turned to Erin. "And you?" Erin looked up, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I saw your name wasn't on the list, so I thought. What, that you couldn't be the owner? Erin said, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean to offend you. I just thought. Dana smiled faintly, but it wasn't a kind smile. You didn't mean to, but you did. You told me I must have had the wrong hotel. You said this was a place for people with money, didn't you? Erin bowed her head. Patrick frowned. Miguel pretended to check his notes to avoid Dana's gaze. Outside staff walking past the hallway slowed, sensing the tension leaking through the glass like mist. Tell me, Erin, Dana said softly, yet her voice filled the room. What does people with money mean to you? It means people who dress well, who arrive with others who look whiter than me. Dana cut in. The room went silent. Erin didn't respond. She only lowered her head as tears dropped onto the table. Dana took a slow breath. Do you know where I worked before opening my first hotel? Erin shook her head. At the front desk, Dana said. Just like you. In a hotel just like this. And I was once denied check-in on a business trip because someone thought I didn't belong. I swore that none of my employees would ever repeat that mistake. And yet you just did. Erin broke into quiet sobs, her shoulders shaking. Calvin glanced at her and shook his head slightly as if to say, Stop before you make it worse. Patrick cleared his throat. Ms. Whitfield, we'll take immediate disciplinary action. Dana raised a hand. I don't want anyone handled. I want to understand why. She turned and walked slowly along the edge of the table, the rhythm of her heels steady and deliberate. I'm not angry because I was insulted. I'm angry because this shows we've forgotten the core of hospitality respect for people. Not just for VIPs, but for everyone. Even for an old woman holding a coupon, or a young man with a torn backpack. Patrick bowed his head. We'll begin retraining all staff immediately, ma'am. Dana stopped and looked straight at him. Retraining doesn't mean throwing them into a classroom to read slides. I want them to understand. I want each of them to ask themselves, am I seeing a person, or am I seeing my own prejudice? Her words froze the room. Miguel looked up, his eyes filled with both respect and guilt. Calvin nodded faintly, exhaling deeply, and Erin, still trembling, lifted her head. For the first time, her eyes no longer held fear, but genuine remorse. Dana returned to her seat, her tone lower now. I don't intend to fire anyone this morning. But if we don't change this culture more, people will eventually have to go. Remember, this customers aren't always right. But we must always be kind. The words dropped like metal against the table. Erin's voice broke. I'm sorry, ma'am. I truly regret it. I didn't think about who you were. I just saw the surface, Dana nodded slowly. You weren't wrong for seeing me. You were wrong for only seeing me. No one spoke. Patrick closed his notebook, gave Dana a slight nod, and signaled the end of the meeting. As everyone stood, Dana added one last thing, her voice soft, yet sharp enough to cut through the silence. Tomorrow we start over. Not with promises, but with actions. If necessary, I'll be the first to stand behind that front desk. Patrick's eyes widened. You mean that Dana smiled? I used to stand there. Maybe they need to remember what that feels like, that serving isn't lowering yourself. It's a different kind of power, the power to make someone feel they belong. She walked out of the conference room. The glass door closed behind her, reflecting her silhouette as she moved down the bright hallway. Her steps were steady, neither fast nor slow. Each one a declaration that true power doesn't need to shout. It only needs conviction. Inside the room, Erin stayed behind, covering her face. Patrick looked toward the window and said quietly, "She doesn't want anyone to bow. She just wants us to wake up." Calvin nodded his voice, low and heavy. Maybe that's why she's successful, not because of money, but because she understands pain. In the hallway, Dana paused before a large mirror. She saw her own reflection, no longer the powerful CEO, but the young woman she once was standing behind a front desk, dreaming of changing the way the world treated people like her. She smiled faintly and thought, maybe this journey was never meant to end. Maybe it begins again, every time someone forgets how to see the humanity in others. And deep within, Dana felt a small, yet unmistakable spark, the belief that from one mistake, she could replant the seeds of respect. That afternoon, a soft rain fell over Seattle, and the droplets clinging to the lobby windows of the Cascade Grand Hotel looked like thousands of memories suspended in time. Every sound, footsteps, voices, the hum of card machines felt quieter than usual. Everyone could sense that something beneath the surface had begun to shift after the morning meeting. But on the ground floor, where the polished front desk still drew every gaze, Erin Wallace was living in a world of her own, a world of regret and fear. She sat there typing her hands, trembling with every keystroke. Each guest that approached made her heart skip, afraid that the next person to appear would be Dana Whitfield. She could still see that woman's eyes, calm, steady, needing no anger or raised voice, yet enough to make every excuse crumble. In those eyes there was no fury, only something deeper, as if Dana hadn't just seen Erin's mistake, but the system that had taught her to be blind. Erin stared at the screen displaying the reservation list, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She didn't notice that, behind her, Calvin Brooks, the night manager, was quietly watching. He walked up to the counter, resting one hand on it, his hoarse voice gentle. "You all right, Erin?" She jumped, slightly looking up. I'm fine, Mr. Calvin. Just checking the new arrivals." Calvin studied her for a long moment before sighing softly. "You don't have to pretend. I know you're not fine. Neither am I." Erin lowered her head, twisting her fingers together. "I don't know what to do. I feel ashamed. Worse, I don't even understand why I thought that way last night. It's like I was programmed to judge someone just because they didn't fit the image I expected." Calvin nodded, slowly, sadness in his eyes. "We've all been there, Erin. This industry, it makes people forget that behind every credit card is a story. I've been here 10 years, and more times than I can count, I've trusted appearances over character. That's my biggest mistake." A cool draft swept through the automatic doors, fluttering the brochures on the counter. Erin looked up. Outside, a grey luxury car pulled up. Her heart clenched. Dana Whitfield was stepping out. The woman looked different today. A long cream coat, black heels, no heavy makeup, yet her face seemed to glow under the lobby lights. Each step she took changed the weight of the room. The sounds in the hotel seemed to slow, as if the entire building bowed in silence. Erin shot to her feet, but Calvin raised a hand. "Let me speak first." Dana approached the desk. She looked at Calvin, then at Erin. Her voice was low but firm. "I need the internal report on last night's incident." Calvin nodded, opening a drawer and pulling out a thin file, handing it to her with both hands. "We've documented everything, ma'am." Dana took it and flipped through the pages. Black ink on white paper. Yet between the lines, she saw something else, fair. Every word was cautious, mechanical, as if written to hide what people really felt. "Do you believe this report reflects what truly happened?" she asked, eyes still on the paper. Calvin said nothing. Erin stared at the floor. Dana set the file back on the counter and pushed it towards them. I don't need a clean report. I need an honest one. What I want isn't to know who was wrong, but why we were wrong. Her words hit like an electric current. Calvin swallowed, then spoke slowly. The simplest reason, Ma'am, is that we forgot. We forgot that the person standing before us isn't just a customer, but a human being. Dana looked at him, her eyes softening. Good. You just said what this entire system needs to hear. Erin stood frozen, her palms damp with sweat. Then she gathered her courage. Ms. or Whitfield, I know an apology means nothing now, but I still want to say it. I judged you unfairly. I let prejudice guide me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know how deeply ashamed I am. The air grew still. Calvin glanced at Dana, waiting for her reaction. Dana didn't answer right away. She looked at the young woman, her gaze not one of judgment, but of someone deciding whether a soul newly awakened could still be saved. Finally she spoke. Do you know what angers me most, Erin? The girl shook her head, voice trembling. No, Ma'am. It's that you didn't realize that in those few minutes you were representing an entire generation of young women in this industry, women who should understand empathy better than anyone. Do you know how many people like me have been looked down upon, and how many people like you have been underestimated? Yet here we are, doing that to each other. Erin's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what else to say, except I'm sorry. Don't say it, Dana replied, her tone gentler now. Do it. From now on, every time you see a guest, ask yourself, are you seeing them or are you seeing your own fear? The silence that followed was long and heavy. Then Dana turned to Calvin. Prepare a training session for all front desk staff. But I want to be there. Not to supervise, but to learn with them. Calvin blinked in surprise. You mean as a participant? Dana nodded. Yes. I want them to understand that respect isn't an order from the top down. It's a habit of the heart. And that begins with me. Patrick Evans stepped out from a nearby office, pausing as he took in the scene. He looked at Dana, this powerful woman, speaking with humility, and in that moment he understood this wasn't a management lesson. It was a lesson in humanity. When Dana left the front desk, her steps no longer carried the chill of the night before. There was something warmer in her expression, now a quiet compassion, unspoken, yet unmistakable. Erin watched her go, seeing her reflection ripple across the polished marble floor. A strange mix of shame and gratitude filled her chest. Calvin murmured almost to himself, We were wrong to think she wanted power. What she truly wants is something far harder, real change. Outside, the drizzle continued, but the evening light pierced through the clouds, casting soft rays into the hotel lobby, like a quiet forgiveness. In that glow, Erin felt a weight lift, not because she was forgiven, but because she had finally learned the greatest lesson of her life: never judge someone until you've truly seen them. And in the corner of the lobby, where the golden plaque read, Cascade Grand, a Whitfield property, Dana paused for a moment and smiled. It wasn't the smile of victory, but the smile of someone who had just planted a seed of hope, the seed of dignity, compassion, and awakening. That afternoon, dark clouds thickened over Seattle, warning of another coming storm. Inside the Cascade Grand Hotel, the silence was so complete you could hear the scratch of pens on paper and the second hand sliding forward. The whole hotel seemed to be holding its breath, every employee aware they were living through a moment where a single wrong breath could make everything collapse. At the grand lobby, the elevator doors opened and Patrick Evans and Miguel Torres stepped out. One was the regional vice president, the other the branch director, and both wore the faces of men who had just walked out of a political storm. Their jackets were still creased, their ties loosened, but their eyes were sharp as blades. An urgent notice from headquarters had just arrived. Dana Whitfield was on the property, and the entire Seattle division was under special control. Patrick clenched his jaw as they moved down the corridor. "If the press gets wind of this, Miguel, we will be crushed," Miguel answered quietly. "I only hope she still wants to hear explanations." "No one explains anything to Dana Whitfield," Patrick said, his voice heavy as lead. "She listens, she observes, then she acts. And once she acts, everything changes forever." They stopped when they saw Dana coming out of the mezzanine conference room with a thick file in hand. She was simply dressed a white shirt and a grey blazer, but her stride, her gaze, and the way she placed each step made everyone fall silent before she spoke. Patrick was the first to speak. "Ms. Whitfield?" Dana looked up, her tone even. "I hear you just arrived." "Yes," Patrick nodded. "We would like to apologize in person and present a plan for remediation." Dana glanced at her watch. "You have 5 minutes." The words made Miguel swallow hard. Patrick understood that these 5 minutes were not only to present a plan, but to prove whether they still deserved to stand inside the system she had built. He opened his laptop, his voice smooth but taut. We immediately audited the training protocols. Human Resources will launch an empathy-first program for all front desk staff and mid-level managers. In addition, Dana cut in her voice, as light as a breeze, yet carrying the weight of a verdict. "I do not need a presentation. I need change." Patrick fell silent. "Do you know what disappoints me most?" Dana continued, her eyes moving from one man to the other. "It is not the lack of professionalism. It is that we have lost the soul of this brand. Cascade Grand is not just a hotel. It is a promise of respect and dignity, and you have turned that promise into an empty slogan." Miguel lowered his head. "Ma'am, we accept responsibility, and we are ready to do whatever it takes to restore your trust." Dana was quiet for a long moment. A draft spun in from the revolving door carrying the scent of impending rain. "All right," she said softly. "If you truly want to begin again, I will give you a chance." Patrick exhaled as if rescued, but Dana was not finished. "That chance is not for you. It is for your employees. I will personally oversee the retraining. Starting tomorrow, I will work here for 1 week as an anonymous guest. No one is to know where I am when I appear or who I am observing. I want to see how people behave when they are not being watched." Miguel looked at Patrick, eyes wide. "You mean a covert inspection?" "No," Dana said, an awakening. Her words sliced through the air. Patrick understood that no one would escape this test. As they left the lobby, Erin stood behind the counter trying to look busy. But when she saw Patrick and Miguel bowing their heads to Dana, she knew that the apology she had given the night before was nothing. Real power had just walked in, and it did not need to raise its voice to be feared. At that moment, the glass doors slid open. A strong gust blew in, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant thunder. Patrick steadied the stack of documents, while Dana simply looked out at the sky. In a flash of lightning, her shadow stretched long across the stone floor, solemn, still, almost unreal. Calvin approached from a distance, his face lined with remorse. "Ms. Whitfield, I would like a private word." Dana nodded. They stepped into the small lounge off the lobby, lit only by the warm, amber glow of wall lamps. Calvin spoke in a low voice. "I have been in this work a long time, ma'am. I know what happened last night is unforgivable. But allow me to be honest. My people are not bad. They just forgot that respect is not a policy, it is an instinct." Dana studied him for a moment, then offered a faint smile. "You are right. That is why I didn't fire anyone. I want them to remember." Calvin nodded gratitude in his eyes. "You are one of the rare leaders in this industry who still believes in people." "Not believes," Dana replied, "chooses to believe. Because if I do not believe they can be better, then this entire system would not be worth keeping." They fell quiet, listening to the first drops of rain tapping the glass roof. Each drop beat a rhythm into Dana's thoughts, calling up the image of a younger woman standing in another hotel lobby long ago, with a crooked name badge and a forced smile after being shouted at by a guest. Back then, she said softly, "I was looked down on, and I promised to build a place where no one would feel small. Perhaps I allowed people like us, the managers, to forget that." Calvin looked at her and nodded slowly. "You do not need to say more. I understand." She turned and stepped back into the lobby. Patrick and Miguel were waiting along with several newly summoned senior staff. Dana stood before them, the gold light catching her face like the beam of a lighthouse. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I am not here to punish anyone. I am here to bring back the values we lost. Starting tomorrow, all staff will work in shifts under random observation. No one will know when I appear, and I want each of you to treat every guest as if it were the first time you were serving your own life." Patrick bowed his head. "Understood, ma'am," Dana continued. "Do not assume I am only testing staff. You, the managers, will do the same. You will stand behind the counter, carry trays, wipe tables, say hello, and have a good day to every guest. If anyone finds that demeaning, that person is unfit to lead." The lobby fell utterly still. No one dared to breathe. Then Dana spoke slowly, each word etched into the air. "Power is not making people afraid. It is the ability to make people change. And if Cascade Grand cannot be a place of respect, I would rather close it than let it betray my ideals." Lightning flared beyond the doors, casting Dana's silhouette on the wall, strong, proud, deeply human. In that moment, everyone understood this woman was not just a CEO. She was the storm that had come to sweep away the old prejudices that chained the world. And outside, the rain began to pour, rushing and fierce, like a vow sealing a rebirth that had just begun. After Dana left the lobby of the Cascade Grand Hotel, remained still, as if time itself had stretched thin. Only the faint sound of rain tapping against the glass could be heard blending with the shallow, uneven breaths of those who had just survived an earthquake of a different kind. No one spoke. No one dared to. Patrick Evans leaned on the counter, eyes closed, sweat gathering at his temples, despite the cool air. He understood that Dana Whitfield hadn't come to inspect, she had come to reset the order, to redefine what it meant to lead. Miguel Torres stood beside him, in silence, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Both men knew that any justification now would only sound hollow. And Erin Wallace, the young woman at the center of it, all sat curled behind the front desk, her hands clenched so tightly they had turned pale. Before her eyes, the image of that woman remained calm, gaze steady voice, no raised tone, yet powerful enough to make an entire room lower its head. Erin had once thought she understood power, But now she realized that true power wasn't in shouting titles or authority. It was in the kind of silence that made the whole world listen. Calvin Brooks emerged from the service corridor, his rough voice cutting through the tension. "All right, everyone, back to work." No one answered. The other staff, from the assistant clerks to the doorman, drifted away quietly, like shadows carrying with them the same unspoken fear. Fear of losing their jobs. Fear of being blamed. Fear of that cold, steely gaze descending on them at any moment. Calvin turned to Erin, his voice softer. "You all right?" Erin looked up, her eyes red. "I don't know. I just don't understand why she didn't fire me." "Because she doesn't need to punish," Calvin said, sitting across from her. "She wants to teach, and that lesson begins with making you live with this shame until you change on your own." His words struck like a blade. But instead of resisting, Erin only nodded faintly. Maybe Calvin was right. What hurt most wasn't fear, but seeing herself reflected in Dana's eyes, small, shallow, and blind. Outside, the echo of car horns rolled across rain-soaked streets. Patrick looked toward the doors and said quietly to Miguel, "I've worked with many CEOs, but none have ever made me feel this small." Miguel nodded. "She doesn't need to yell. She just looks at you, and that look makes you face yourself." Patrick gave a dry, bitter laugh. "You know what's funny? Last night, when I heard she was denied a room, I thought, probably another difficult guest. Now I get it. Maybe we're all difficult, just in our own way, because we're afraid to face the truth." Miguel said nothing. Upstairs in the penthouse suite, 1601. Dana stood by the window. Below her, the city of Seattle stretched out like a mirror of the modern world, dazzling, prosperous, but cold and distant. The headlights of passing cars cast fleeting light across her face, half bright, half shadowed. She took a sip of black coffee, the bitterness lingering on her tongue. In her mind, she kept replaying Erin's face, the frightened eyes, the trembling voice, the stammered apology. No, Dana wasn't angry. She had seen hundreds, perhaps thousands of faces like Erin's. They weren't malicious. They were simply never taught how to see people different from themselves. Her phone buzzed gently on the table, a message from Patrick. "All staff have been notified about the anonymous evaluation plan. Thank you for giving us the chance to make this right." Dana looked at the screen and smiled faintly, exhaustion softening her features. She set the phone down and moved closer to the window. Outside, the rain began to pour harder, each drop streaking down the glass like a trail of memory. Her mind drifted back to her past, to when she was 25, a night shift receptionist at a small hotel in Portland. That night, a disheveled man in a wrinkled suit stumbled in drunk and shouting that she wasn't qualified to work there. Her manager hadn't defended her. Dinah had stood still, lips pressed tight, swallowing her tears. That night, she made herself a promise. One day she would build a place where no one would ever have to bow their head in humiliation again. And now she was witnessing that dream being distorted in the very place that bore her name. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Dana said. The door opened. Patrick and Miguel entered, carrying a thick folder. Patrick spoke first. "Ma'am, I've prepared the detailed restructuring plan." Dana gestured for them to sit. "No need to go over it. I just want to know, are you ready to do this with me? Not on paper, but in action." Patrick met her eyes, serious and steady. "Yes. I've already spoken with my team. Starting tomorrow, all managers will work directly in the lobby, greeting guests, handling feedback, and observing one another. We'll start by changing how we see. Dana nodded slowly. Good. I don't need perfection. I just need awareness. Miguel hesitated, then asked softly, Ma'am, what about the receptionist? Erin, will you keep her? Dana turned to the window. I don't know yet, but I want to see what she does with the chance she's been given. Patrick exhaled in relief. I think she'll change. I saw it in her this morning. I hope so. Dana said, her tone calm but warm. Because if not, we'll be no better than the people we once set out to change. The room fell quiet. Patrick and Miguel stood and left, leaving Dana alone. She sat down, took out a pen and wrote a line in her notebook. Real change doesn't begin with those who are criticized, but with those who dare to look in the mirror. She closed the notebook and glanced at the clock. It was past 9 in the evening. Outside, the rain fell heavier, washing the city clean. She stood looking down into the lobby where Erin was wiping the front desk, alone, her movements slow, careful, almost trembling. A faint smile curved on Dana's lips. Maybe she whispered, the seed has already begun to grow. Then she turned and walked into the night. Her figure melted into the soft city lights, the image of a power that needed no weapon, only the quiet belief that people can become better if someone has enough patience to truly see it in them. That night, the rain finally stopped. A soft mist blanketed the sky over Seattle, like a silver veil reflecting the golden lights spilling from the glass towers below. In the penthouse of the Cascade Grand Hotel, Dana Whitfield was still awake. She sat by the window, her laptop glowing on the table, but her eyes were not on the screen. Instead, they wandered to a place far away, a moment buried 20 years ago that had never truly left her mind. The sounds of the night rain dripping from the roof wind, whispering through the cracks, carried her back to that night in Portland when she was 24. It was the same hotel lobby scene, the same graveyard shift, the same fluorescent lights glinting off wet tiles. But back then she wasn't a CEO. She had no reputation, no authority. She was just a young woman in an oversized uniform, wearing a tired smile and holding on to one fragile dream to be spoken to with respect. Girl, I said, remake this drink. The sharp voice of a male guest shattered the stillness of that night. The glass hit the floor and broke red wine, spreading across the white tile like blood. Dana bent down to clean it, but the man pushed her hand away and barked. I wasn't talking to the help. I was talking to the manager. The manager, an older man with graying hair, rushed out, bowed slightly and said softly, I'm sorry, sir. She's new. Please don't mind her. Then he turned to Dana and whispered, Don't say anything, just smile. She smiled. But inside something cracked. Not her pride, but her faith, the belief that people could earn respect simply by working hard enough. Even now, Dana could feel that moment as vividly as if it had just happened. She hadn't cried. Instead, she gathered the shattered glass, wiped the floor clean, and made herself a vow one day she would build a place where no one would ever have to smile through humiliation again. She looked down now at the hotel lobby below, still glowing even this late. Erin Wallace was there, cleaning the front desk alone. The young woman moved slowly, but no longer carelessly. Each sheet of paper was aligned neatly, each nameplate wiped until it gleamed. Every small, deliberate gesture made Dana nod slightly to herself. Maybe awakening begins with something as simple as that. Her phone buzzed gently. A message from Sarah Kim, her trusted assistant. The media hasn't heard about the incident. The PR team is asking if you want to release a statement. Dana gave a faint, tired smile and typed back, No need. We don't fix mistakes with publicity. We fix them with action. She set the phone down, closed her eyes, and let her mind drift. She remembered her early years when it was just her in a tiny rented apartment with a cheap wooden desk and piles of unpaid bills. There were nights she worked until 3 a.m, typing out her first hotel business plan. People called her crazy, said a woman of color could never break into luxury hospitality, but she didn't listen. Every insult became a brick, and she used those very bricks to build her empire. She once believed success would erase the past, that when she became a CEO, when her name gleamed on gold plaques across the skyline, all prejudice would fade. But last night, standing before Erin, Dana realized the wound had never healed. It had only been wrapped in reputation. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," Dana said. Calvin Brooks, the night manager, entered his face, weary but resolute. "I'm sorry to bother you this late," he said, "but I thought you should see this." He handed her a small piece of paper, a handwritten note, messy but full of emotion. "Miss Whitfield, I don't know where to begin, but I need to thank you for not firing me. Tonight I learned what it feels like to be looked down on. When I walked into the staff room, everyone looked at me like I carried a disease. I know that feeling now, the feeling of being unseen. And I understand that's exactly how I made you feel yesterday. I won't say I'll change. I'll prove it. Erin." Dana read the note silently. Something stirred inside her, a faint, delicate vibration, like a string touched by wind. She folded the letter and handed it back to Calvin. "Thank you. Keep her on. I want to see who she becomes after this." Calvin nodded. "I'll train her myself. Maybe I need to relearn what it means to lead." Dana looked at him, a small smile curving her lips. "Do you know the difference between a manager and a leader, Calvin?" He shook his head. "A manager controls. A leader awakens." Calvin stood still, absorbing every word. Then he bowed slightly and left. The room fell quiet again. Dana walked to her desk and opened a worn leather notebook, one she always carried with her. Its edges were frayed, its pages filled with reflections, plans and quotes she wrote to remind herself of who she was. She turned to a blank page and wrote carefully, "Prejudice never dies, it only changes shape. And each generation must learn to recognize it within themselves." She set the pen down and exhaled. Outside, the sky was clearing. The rain had stopped completely. Faint stars peeked through the thinning clouds. Below, the streets were nearly empty. In the glow of the city lights, the hotel shimmered like a gemstone, freshly cleaned, but still bearing a crack. Dana knew tomorrow would not be easy, but she also knew that every true transformation begins with a single fracture. She closed the notebook, switched off the lights, leaving only the faint reflection from the window, casting a calm glow across her face. In that moment, Dana was not a CEO, not a figure of power. She was once again the young woman who had bent down to pick up broken glass and decided to turn pain into the foundation of an empire built on humanity. Outside, the wind swept softly through the city, carrying the scent of night rain. Dana closed her eyes and let the breeze brush her face. In that stillness, she smiled the quiet smile of someone who had just touched a forgotten part of herself. The old wound had never healed, but perhaps it was that very wound, not victory, that reminded her who she truly was. The next morning, Seattle awoke beneath a thin layer of mist draped over the bay. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, reflecting off the glass walls of the Cascade Grand Hotel. making the building sparkle like a giant crystal. Inside, the lobby clock struck 7 sharp, and every employee was already in place at least 30 minutes earlier than usual. No one had told them to, but everyone understood. Today was the day they would be seen. In the grand lobby, the chairs were neatly aligned, fresh flowers replaced the old ones, and the aroma of coffee drifted softly through the air. The atmosphere was both solemn and uneasy. Every staff member adjusted their uniform, tied their hair, and straightened their name tags. Even the doormen stood tall and alert, their eyes fixed on the elevator, waiting for the moment Dana Whitfield would appear. Then the elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Dana stepped out her pace, steady and calm, each click of her heels against the marble floor marking its own rhythm. She wore a black suit, a crisp white shirt, and no jewelry except for a slim watch. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone made the entire lobby stand straighter, as if a gust of wind had swept through. Behind her were Patrick Evans, Miguel Torres, and Laura Price from Human Resources, carrying a thick folder in her arms. The group walked directly toward the glass conference room by the lobby. Inside, Calvin Brooks and Erin Wallace were already seated. The air was thick, heavy as fog. The door closed softly, and all eyes turned to Dana. She sat at the head of the table, set the folder down, clasped her hands, and spoke her voice low but firm. We will begin with the truth, not to find out who was right, but to understand why we were all wrong. Her words made Calvin lower his head slightly. Erin sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Dana looked around the room. I want to hear each of you in your own words. What happened inside your hearts last night? Patrick spoke first. I think we were so busy protecting the image of our brand that we forgot the brand itself is made of people. Miguel continued, his voice subdued. We let the fear of losing control turn us indifferent. When a staff member acted wrongly, I should have asked what made them that way, not how to hide it. Dana nodded slightly, her gaze settling on Erin. And you, Erin, lifted her head. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her gaze was steady. I was wrong. Not just because I disrespected you, but because I didn't see the person standing in front of me. I saw a face, simple clothes, and a set of assumptions, and I acted on those assumptions. Where do those assumptions come from? Erin Dana asked. Erin bit her lip. I think they were planted long ago. When I worked at a rest stop, I saw wealthy people looking down on staff. I thought I despised them, but maybe I learned from them without realizing it. The room fell silent. Her words hit deeper than anyone expected. Dana leaned back slightly, her voice soft yet resonant. Thank you for your honesty. You're right, Erin. Prejudice is something we absorb without noticing. It hides in tone, in glances, in the way we judge someone within 3 seconds of meeting them. And if we don't have the courage to face it, we become the very people we once despised. Erin bowed her head as tears slipped down her cheeks, not from fear this time, but from awakening. Dana rose, walking slowly around the table. She stopped behind Calvin and placed a hand on his shoulder. Calvin, you've been in management for years. Do you know what disappointed me most? Calvin shook his head, his voice low. No, Mom. It wasn't that you were wrong, Dana said. It was that you were silent. The silence of those in power is the cradle in which injustice grows. Her words made Patrick and Miguel exchange a glance. They knew she wasn't just speaking to Calvin. She was speaking to all of them. Dana returned to the head of the table, her tone slower, now heavier. Last night I thought about this deeply. I could have made a scene, fired a few people, let the media feast, and watched the world forget in a week. But I don't want Cascade Grand to be an example of a scandal. I want it to be a turning point. From today, every person in this room will be responsible for rebuilding the culture here, not through slogans, but through the smallest acts. When a staff member says, "Good morning," make sure they truly look the person in the eye. When someone makes a mistake, teach them, don't cast them out. Erin exhaled softly, as if releasing a burden. Calvin nodded slowly. Patrick scribbled notes, while Miguel sat quietly, his eyes filled with a newfound respect. Laura, the HR representative, spoke gently. "Ma'am, may I record your words as part of our new training program?" Dana shook her head. "No. Live it before you write it. We don't need lessons. We need awareness." The room grew still again, heavy, yet clean, as if someone had opened a window and let fresh air rush in. After a pause, Dana turned to Erin. "Are you ready to start again?" Erin met her gaze, her voice trembling but sure. "Yes. But this time I won't just say, 'I'm sorry.' I'll learn to see people the way you saw me, not through judgment, but through belief that they can be better." Dana smiled faintly. "Good, because the world doesn't change through promises. It changes through people brave enough to believe like that." She walked to the door, then paused. "Tomorrow I want everyone to come down to the lobby. No name tags, no titles. Work one shift alongside the front desk staff, the doormen, the cleaners. Only when you understand the weight they carry each day will you earn the right to speak of respect." Patrick asked, "Shall I announce it to the management team?" "No," Dana replied. "Let them see, and let it spread. If a value needs a command to survive, it's already dead." As she stepped out, the morning light streamed through the glass, wrapping her in a warm glow. The door closed, but her voice lingered in the room, not as an order, but as an awakening. Erin looked around, feeling as if she had just stepped out of a long dream. She turned to Calvin and whispered, "I understand now." She doesn't want to be respected. She wants people to learn to respect themselves. Calvin smiled faintly. That's something only those who have been looked down on can understand that deeply. Outside, the sunlight grew stronger, filling the lobby where the staff began their day. Behind the front desk, Erin adjusted her name tag, took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, she felt truly seen, not by others but by herself. And on the upper floor, Dana looked down, her eyes calm. A quiet thought echoed within her. Yesterday was the test. Today is the beginning. Seattle gleamed under the new morning light, and the Cascade Grand began a new Chapter 1, where respect was no longer a slogan, but the very breath of everyone within its walls. That afternoon, the hotel lobby was unusually quiet. The familiar sounds, rolling suitcases, clinking glasses, opening doors, all seemed distant. In the small staff lounge behind the front desk, Erin Wallace sat alone, clutching a cup of cold latte, her eyes blank. Inside her, everything hung suspended between shame and a desperate longing to begin again. The door opened. Dinah Whitfield walked in without announcement. Erin immediately stood up, her heart pounding so hard it felt suffocating. But Dana simply gestured, "Sit down." "I'm not here to reprimand you." Her voice was soft as a breeze, yet carried an authority that allowed no evasion. The two women sat facing each other. A full minute passed in silence, filled only with the ticking of a clock and the faint scent of coffee fading away. Finally, Dana asked, Have you ever felt small at work? Erin blinked, then nodded. Yes, many times. I used to work at a truck stop. My boss yelled at me every day. I felt invisible. And last night, Dana said quietly, "You made me feel the same way." There was no accusation, no anger, just truth. Erin lowered her head, tears falling onto her hands. I know, I was so foolish. I looked at you and thought you couldn't possibly be the head of a place like this. I looked at you and only saw an ordinary guest. No, Dana said, shaking her head. You weren't foolish. You just looked at the world through a pair of glasses someone else put on you. We all learn how to judge from an early age. But an adult has to learn how to take those glasses off. Erin looked up, startled. You've been treated like that before. Dana smiled faintly. I used to work the night shift at a front desk. I was once ordered to grab a broom called Sweetheart, told to smile while being insulted, and I swore I'd build a place where no one would ever be made small again. But it seems I haven't done that well enough. A single tear rolled down Erin's cheek. I'm sorry. I truly understand now. Dana slowly stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't be sorry. Change. Every guest who walks through these doors carries a story. Your job is to make them feel that they matter, no matter who they are. When you can do that, you'll never have to apologize again. Erin nodded, her trembling hand tightening around the cup. I will do that. I know you will, Dana said, her tone softening. Because sometimes the ones who make mistakes are the ones who understand the value of respect the most. She turned toward the door, paused for a moment, and said without looking back, Thank you, Erin. You reminded me why I started this journey. The door closed gently behind her. Erin remained still, tears streaming down her face, yet her heart felt light, as if she had finally laid down a heavy weight. She realized this wasn't just a conversation between a boss and her employee, but a meeting between two people who had both been wounded by the world and were now learning how to heal it. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the glass panels of the Cascade Grand lobby, casting a soft glow across the marble floor like a sheet of silk. The whispers were gone. The wary glances had faded. The staff now smiled more genuinely, spoke more softly but with sincerity. At the center of the front desk, Erin Wallace stood upright, her face calm and composed. When an elderly guest approached, she bowed slightly and offered a true smile. Good afternoon, sir. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Her voice was warm, no longer carrying the tone of submission, but of respect. From the upper floor, Dana Whitfield watched through the clear glass. She saw everything slowly returning to its true meaning, not through orders, but through awareness. A faint smile touched her lips as she gathered her papers preparing to leave the hotel. On her desk lay a small folded note, handwritten by Erin. Thank you for seeing me. I'll learn to see others the same way. Dana held the note in her hand as she walked to her car. Outside, Seattle glistened beneath the afternoon sun. The city was still noisy, still hurried yet to her. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. She looked out the window and whispered, Respect doesn't begin with others. It begins with how we choose to see the world. The car pulled away from the hotel. Behind her, the Cascade Grand stood tall as ever, but inside it had changed. It was no longer just a place to stay, but a place to truly see one another. And as the sunset painted the horizon in shades of violet, Dana smiled softly and said, Dignity doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be kept. From the perspective of an expert in leadership ethics and corporate culture, the story of Dana Whitfield is not merely a lesson about power or rebuilding, but a powerful reminder that respect cannot be enforced by rules, it must be cultivated from the heart. When a leader chooses to listen instead of punish, to teach instead of discard, they not only save an organization, but awaken the humanity that has long been dormant within its people. Dana proved that real change does not begin with policy, but with the eyes that recognize the value in others. If you believe the world can still become a better place simply by how kindly we treat one another each day, please like this video to share that message, subscribe to the channel to follow more stories of compassion and dignity, and comment below with the phrase that reflects your belief: keep respect.